Welcome to the Dug in a Pub podcast, where I share thoughts, stories, and conversations about my life and my journey post-suicide attempt.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
So pull up a stool and let's see if we can change the world.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Dug in a Pub podcast. Today I have Brett with me again.
Hello.
We're going to talk about questions somebody brought up after listening to episode 5, talking about relationships. We were trying to figure out what the topic actually is, and it seems like it's relationships and expectations. Some of it's keeping yourself safe in relationships, I think, is kind of what transactional relationships. I was going to read the question.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not really a question. She kind of prompts a topic. So yeah, just kind of going back to kind of my viewpoint on this. Back in my past, pretty much every relationship I had, I looked at in a very transactional manner. I would help people. I was very helpful. I did handyman work for people, and I did other things for people. But it was always because I had this expectation of getting something back out of that. If I do this for them, I'll get something back out of it. If I do the dishes, it'll make the missus happy. We might fool around. There was all these. I always had in the back of my mind what I was going to get out of something before I did a thing.
Yeah. I think even if the transactional expectation is that they will like you more, or that they will do things for you at some point down the road when you need it, it's still transactional. You're not doing it just to help. You're
right. Doing
it because you want something in return, or you think you're going to get something in return.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've really learned to not do anymore. Have those expectations. So from the outside, it might look exactly the same. My behavior from an external view is probably, close to the same, but internally it's entirely different. When I help somebody now, I don't have any expectations of getting anything back out of it. I don't worry about it. I don't put that weight on it anymore. As soon as you help somebody expecting something back, then it seems more like business than anything else.
Yeah, you have to learn to live without keeping that checks and balance sheet. Because, to have that checks and balance sheet of, I did this, they owe me, always leads to disappointment.
Yeah.
In one way or another, because what you get in return from someone is going to be different or less than you thought it would be, or they're going to forget, or their lives get busy, or whatever. And if you're expecting that return, it's a bad place for you to be. Yeah,
and the other part of the question or the prompt they gave us was, how do you operate in a world where when you're polite to somebody, they have expectations of you? And that's the thing you really can't do. You can't control anybody's perception. You can't control anybody's expectations. But what you can do is try to me, in a case like this, is just be an example. Now, unfortunately, you can't change the world, and you can't make people not have expectations of you.
Yeah, and I think when I read the question, I have a different perspective because I'm female, and I have been in that situation where, you strike up a polite conversation with someone and all of a sudden they're following you down the street and asking for your phone number. And that is, it's a frightening place to be. It's a very frightening place to be. And so the tendency, I think, after you've experienced that once or twice or many times, the tendency is to just kind of withdraw and stop being friendly and stop doing nice things for people, for strangers anyway, or people you don't know, because there's that fear that they are going to have expectations and their expectations will somehow harm you or just make your life more difficult. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't have a good answer for it. It's definitely a fear in our society. I was telling Doug earlier, we have so many movies and books where, two people's eyes meet across a crowded room and they say 3 words to each other, and 2 hours later they're married and have kids, or at least sleeping together. And everyone thinks that's the normal expectation, and it is absolutely not. But it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, the sexualization or hypersexualization of people in advertising, primarily women in advertising, leads to these false beliefs of how relationships should work, of how interaction should work. I have so many friends in my divorce group from my past where a guy would go out and he'd meet a girl, and I was guilty of this too. After my marriage ended, a woman would talk to me and go, "Oh, she wants to date. This would be awesome. I'd love to date her." And she was just being friendly. And I was putting expectations into it. And, she had no control over how I was reacting to her being nice to me. But, yeah, you can't, what could someone have done to me? They'd have to say right away, "Yeah, you're a really nice guy, but we're never going to date." And that immediately, that puts up weird vibes too. So
real weird vibes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for some guys, it leads to, "I'm going to win you over." She just doesn't know how great I am yet.
Right.
And then they become pushier.
Yeah. So I don't think there's an easy answer on this one. It's something, I think it's more of a societal issue. I have people who, female friends who, when they go jogging, they let several friends know, "Hey, I'm going jogging. This is the route I'm going to take. This is about how long I should be gone." So, that kind of stems back from, if I talk to somebody and they expect something, you're getting ready to jog. You don't want to talk to somebody before you start, lest they start thinking something and they come with you, and then there's this tension. Even if it's completely innocent, you don't know. There's this, I'll go along with that whole, I hate to say it, but the Me Too thing, where women are always on guard. There's this thing that's happened in society where women are so victimized that they're afraid to be friendly because there's an expectation that a lot of men have, that if I'm friendly to a guy, then he's going to think something, and then what do I do?
And I think it's sad in that it impinges on women's ability to be a whole person. Because if you are a friendly person and you're an outgoing person, you're an extroverted person, you want to talk to people, you want to be friendly, you want to do nice things for folks. But there's always that fear. And the sad thing to me is when you shut down those human impulses of kindness because you want to protect yourself. And protecting yourself is essential. But there's a balance. And I think that there are ways that you can be kind and friendly to people in a situation that limits the danger. In groups, or when you're with friends, or, at a party, or even in the workplace. Being kind to someone in the workplace may not have the same danger as being kind to someone, down on the street while you're shopping. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kind of test it out and try it in places where you feel safe doing it, and then build on that, knowing full well that, anytime you open yourself, anytime you open your heart, anytime you are kind to others, there is always a risk that they can hurt you. And that's part of being open. It's part of being trusting, is knowing that there may be some risk and finding that balance that you're comfortable with.
All right. And then, for me, because I open up to just about everybody, I will, one of the things I've said is I'll never give my heart to someone to break again, but I will let absolutely everybody into it. If I'm starting a relationship, I can't have any expectations of that either. So I don't want to guard myself against getting hurt, because then I'm not going to be as open. And that's the balance, is how do you open yourself up completely to somebody and understand that there's really nothing they can do. I don't want to say hurt you, because there are times when bad things happen. There's a care I take in my openness that I don't worry about getting hurt or not. I can control how I react to somebody. I can't control how they react. Does that make sense? Am I saying that?
Yeah,
right?
and I think it's again, instead of using the word hurt, I think of the word diminish.
Yeah.
Because there are times when people are going to hurt you, but you should not allow others to diminish you.
Yeah, put that quote unquote hurt into the right place and right perspective, and give it the right weight in your life and in the grand scheme of things is the trick.
Yeah, because interactions with other people, it's guaranteed there are going to be times that you're hurt because you have an ego, as much as you might try not to.
Yep.
And your ego doesn't like to feel like you're less or you're stupid or you've been caught in something that you didn't expect to get caught in. Ego likes to be right all the time. Yep. And likes to be powerful. And so there are times when you will be hurt. And then how you manage that hurt is an internal thing that you have control over and can be the step that keeps you from being diminished.
Yeah. And another big phrase that kind of ties in with all this is toxic masculinity. And I think the advertising industry, the movie industry, TV, all kind of feed into that. There seems to be a drive for men to always be right, to always be strong, to never fail, to never be weak. I think that's part of what drove my nephew to his suicide, was that toxic masculinity. He was in a bad spot. He didn't know how to ask for help because he was kind of taught that men don't ask for help, men don't cry. And, that makes it hard for men and women to interact at a lot of times because men need to be strong, and there's this egoic need for men to have the upper hand. And I think that ties into this whole thing where if a woman's talking to a man, the man feels, she wants me. It becomes the initial reaction. At least it used to be for me. And from a lot of the conversations I had early on in my divorce group, but those men going through divorce, when they were going out and meeting women, they almost universally asked that. And, I'll throw dick pics in there with this because, again, I can't imagine that's ever worked, and I'd like to apologize on behalf of the male species to every woman who has received an unsolicited one. Here, you find a guy online and you're talking and things are nice, and all of a sudden he sends you a picture of this, and it's like, why? Why would you do that? So I completely understand why women are always guarded. This shit happens, and it shouldn't, and it's wrong, and any guy who sends an unsolicited one is wrong. He's wrong.
Yes.
100% wrong. Never do it.
Yes.
Ask, hey, would you like to see a picture of my schlong? And if the answer is no, you never send one out. You don't.
I would venture to guess the answer would be no most of the time.
Most of the time. If it ever occurs you to do that, don't. But that ties into this. You're friendly to somebody and you think there's a relationship starting, and then there's toxic masculinity, sending pictures of your parts to a woman or a male if that's who you're trying to date. I don't understand it. I don't get it. It seems the amount of ego you would have to do that and think, she might not like me now, but this will get her. Come on, it's crazy. But
I also have to mention here that this whole conversation is very heterocentric because that's where Doug and I are coming from.
Right.
But it's interesting. I have an awful lot of friends that are gay and lesbian, and it's not all male-female. No. I have seen these same issues in lesbian relationships where one person is the aggressor and the pursuer and the dominant sort of, quote, male, end quote, personality, and it causes the same problem. So you don't have to be male to sometimes suffer some of these toxic behaviors that have been attributed to males traditionally. And likewise, there are definitely toxic female behaviors as well. You think about the nagging shrew wife who nothing her husband does is good enough. That's very toxic femininity.
Yeah.
And I think all of those things tie back to expectations and transactional relationships.
Yep.
And ego, and they're false narratives, and we need to just work very, very hard to end them.
Yeah, and you could even take that to, not necessarily male or female, because there's really no such thing as that binary, but just a dominant submissive, where there are some people and personalities where they always need to be the dominant, and there are other people whose personalities leads them to always want to be the submissive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because you can be submissive and be perfectly healthy and fine, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. And that's just how you are and how you view the world and how you fit into it. But there are times when that dominance becomes toxic, or the submissiveness becomes toxic because you do it as a sacrifice to yourself. You subjugate yourself to the relationship in an unhealthy manner. And, there are times in perfectly healthy relationships where they're dominant and submissive, and we won't get into that. But... it's one of those things another thing to be aware of in these relationships. And when you're interacting, is the person you're interacting with trying to, get dominance over you? Are they trying to do that? Is that their expectation of the relationship?
And are they trying to change you in some way? Are they going against the true you? Are they diminishing you?
Yeah.
By forcing you into a more dominant or a more submissive role than you personally are comfortable with. Wow, we've gone a long way from the original question.
Well, but they're all. That's a problem. It's a big topic. It's a big question. But, going back to the original, it was kind of how do you keep people from having expectations when you interact with them? And I guess the short answer is you can't. All you can do is learn to manage your expectations and, keep yourself safe, manage your expectations. And if you need to, then you need to, throw the flag and say, yeah, you've crossed the line, you're pushing too hard, or you've misread what I've done. And that's the hardest thing to do. You can never control someone's perceptions at all. It's impossible. When you ask a question, always be prepared for the answer. So if you're starting to interact with someone, be prepared for what they might do, and try not to keep yourself guarded, but not to the point where you can't be an active part in it, because at some point you become too guarded and you always got your foot out the door, and whatever was happening or might have happened will never get there because you've never jumped all the way in. And for me, I jump all the way in now. Whenever I meet anybody, I'm just all in. I give that person as much of me as they will take, because I'm trying to make the world smaller. But that's me. I'm not careless. I'm very careful with myself, but I'm very open. And it's been a tricky balance to get there. But
and again, it's easier for you.
I'm a middle class cis white male. I mean, I am the definition of privilege. I know I am, and I understand that.
But I think that, when you are just interacting with someone for the very first time, it's really, really hard. Once you start to build a relationship, the hard part then becomes the communication, and being really open and honest about your feelings and using the most correct language that you can to try and show the other person, explain to the other person what you want, what you need, how the relationship feels to you.
Be verbose.
Yeah. And even telling someone, if someone's late to a date and you get angry with them because they're late, don't say, you're late again, you're always late, blah, blah, blah. Try and put it in your perspective. I was feeling like you're not taking me seriously, or something like that. Give them your actual feelings as much as possible. The more open you are about your feelings rather than putting it on them, the easier it is to break down those expectations and to understand that, what they do is beyond your control, but how you react to it is where your power lies.
Yep. Yep. So I think we kind of answered that question in a roundabout way, and we kind of hit some of the. Well, when we were talking about what do we talk about and how do we talk about this, we're like, man, this is a really big thing, because we're trying to. Someone's basically asking, how do you control someone's expectations? Is how I read that. Yeah, you can't. All you can do is learn to understand that going into it, and be upfront and honest with your expectations. If they ask you something, or if they start to cross a line, set your boundaries. You got to set your boundaries hard and fast and early, because if they push past your boundaries and you don't say anything, then it's harder to reset those boundaries. You got to set expectations early if they have them. You got to do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But, so, I don't know if you have anything.
Well, I just wanted to add in that, even in relationships, when Doug and I first met, we were both dating other people. We were both absolutely convinced that we didn't want a long-term relationship. We weren't in it for, forever and ever. We were trying to have fun. We were trying to meet people. We were trying to learn more about ourselves. And we were very open and honest about that from the beginning. And it worked. Mm-hmm. And then several months later, what we were looking for changed. And we both realized, this person is more than I thought they were going to be. And I want to have them in my life. And again, we were open and honest about that with each other. Mm-hmm. And it led us to where we are now, which is totally not where I expected to be 10 years ago.
Nope.
But, you have to be willing to adapt and adjust in a relationship, because human beings change, expectations change, situations change, and your relationship is going to change too. So what worked 6 months ago or last month is not going to work today.
Yeah, we checked in with each other a lot in the early dating, as to where we thought things were going and where do you think it's going. And we just kind of spent some time having those discussions early on to make sure we were both headed down the road that seemed right for both of us. Because the last thing you want to do is drag the other one along to someplace they don't want to be. And then all of a sudden there's resentment and unhappiness. So... But yeah, check your expectations at the door and make sure those expectations are known to the other people involved, because that keeps everything, going the right direction. So I think we'll kind of wrap this one up. So thanks for listening. Hopefully this kind of answered the question. If anybody else out there has questions about anything, we've never done this before. So ask us questions. Tell us if we're wrong. I don't mind being wrong. My daughter has corrected me on several times and has taught me more than I ever could have thought by calling me to the mat on some things. But so yeah, thanks. I think that's it.
I think so. Thanks much.
Bye-bye. We're going to try something new right now. I have a random question app on my phone. So we're going to pick one of these and then do a random question and then talk about it. So I hit random, and it's a personal growth is the category.
Okay.
And it says, do you believe in love at first sight, or do you think it takes time to grow?
Wow. This, I think, ties in very closely with the concept of, romantic love and movie love. And yeah, I think there's a very definite thing as desire at first sight and attraction at first sight. And I also believe that you should love other people, but not in that way. So, when I was young, I used to believe in love at first sight. And my first boyfriend, I was crazy head over heels in love with him the very first time that we talked. But looking back on it, that is not what I consider love now. It was attraction and lust and desire. Yeah. It was not love. And the love came later. The more time we spent together, the more we interacted. But I have friends who swear that they fell in love at first sight and they've been together 30 years. So I don't know.
Yeah, it all depends how you define love. I love everybody. And I'm trying to think when I first met you. That first night, I was bitten pretty hard that first night we met. When I look back at some other people I've met, and I don't think that's what is love, I guess is the question. I think what it is you have a very strong attraction to somebody, and then as you get to know them, you might think you love them from the moment you see them, and then that idea, that romantic notion gets backfilled by the reality of the relationship. And then you go, it was love at first sight. Well, yeah, but you took 4 months to really fall in love with them. And if you want to say you did from day one, sure.
Right.
But I think it's more of a backfill than a love at first sight.
I guess I've also had situations where I have seen someone felt that exact same initial attraction that I had for my first boyfriend, and it turned into a holy cow, what am I doing very quickly. And, so you can mistake those initial attraction feelings as love when there is not a good place to have love. And, I think it's really easy to mistake infatuation, attraction, passion, desire for love.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, now we're going to do one more.
Okay.
You can send a 5-word message that will be delivered to every cell phone in your country anonymously. What will you send?
Oh, this is not a spur-of-the-moment question. I can't. I'm going to have to think about this one for a couple days.
No.
Oh, wow.
Excuse us as we hum and count words in our head. But, it goes along with, who would you invite to dinner if you could pick anybody, living your dad, or one of those things. Your mom
Mine is
said
6
clean.
words. Mine is 6 words.
Sorry. No good. Clean your room. No, it's only 3. Love one another. Take each other to dinner. There you go.
I want to say you are enough right now.
There you go. I like that.
I think we need to spread more positive messages, and I think people need to be told that what they are today, what they are this morning, is fine. It is good enough right now. You can be better later if you want. If you want to work at it, that's fine. That's good. But right now, in this moment, you are enough right now.
And mine would be, life is short. Love everyone.
I like that too.
So thanks for listening to this episode of the Dug in a Pub podcast. Thanks to Brett for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
She's in the house, so it's always easy to have her as a guest. I do have a couple more interviews coming up. Next episode 8, will be the second half of my interview with Eliza Rickman. We get more into relationships and anxiety and some of those issues. I just interviewed Jessica Jones from Giant Jones Brewing in Madison, Wisconsin. Had an interesting talk about the brewery and some of the brewing process and that brewery. And I have an interview coming up with one of the owners of Brickstore Pub. So that'll be cool. And some more things going. I appreciate everybody listening. Please share this. Ask me questions. If you want to be a guest, let me know. I can remote anybody in from around the world with the software I use. I'd love to talk to more people. It's all about making the world smaller and trying to make the world a better place. I don't have any of the answers. Apparently people tell me I give good advice, so I thought I would try to give more of it out. But yeah, I have no problem being wrong, because if I'm never wrong, I never learn. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.